Mabrika, welcome, bienvenidos to this very first episode of our live Let's Talk Taino. I'm so excited to be here with you. I wanted to do this for you. A lot of you have been asking for community building activities. A lot of us are kind of alone, trying to practice Taino alone. That's a very hard thing to do. So I wanted to do this with you today so we can maybe practice a little bit of Taino. I promise it'll be easy even if you haven't watched the videos. We'll walk through a few things. We'll get to know each other because that's really the whole point of community building activities, right? Is to get to know each other. Then we'll do some Q&A. A lot of you have been asking amazing questions. And so I thought, hey, why not share some of the questions and some of the answers that I've been able to research with the rest of the community. I'm sure you guys are all thinking the same thing. So I wanted to share that. And of course, as we go through anything, the practice activities, the Q&A, just type your questions in the chat box. I promise I'll try to get through all of them. I'm also learning along with you. So if there are questions there that I can't answer and I need to research, don't worry. We'll go back and I'll add the questions and answers as comments once I post this video. I think that is the cool thing that I actually get to do. Since I'm studying along with you, when you guys ask questions, I get to do my research, and honestly, I find that fun. So you guys are helping me. So we'll do that. And then towards the end, I do have a really cool announcement from one of our community members. And so we're hoping to really get to continue practicing Taino together. So if you will permit me for 1 second, I'm going to direct myself to our Spanish speakers. Hola, bienvenidos a todos. Estamos aquí hoy para practicar Taino y conocernos un poco más. Si se sienten más cómodos agregando sus preguntas en español en el chat, por favor, adelante. Trataré de contestarles en español también. Si no tengo una respuesta, ya que sabemos que esta recuperación del Taino está en sus inicios, trataré de hacer mis investigaciones y agregar las respuestas como comentarios después cuando ponga este video en YouTube. Okay, so let's get started. I'm so excited to be here. So just so all of you know, we'll be using English as our lingua franca, our common language, because we have community members all over the place. I want to let you guys know, you guys are amazing. We have 1,500 plus community members already. I have people writing in from Germany, from Cuba, the Dominican Republic. We have our Haitian sisters and brothers, Jamaicans, and of course Boricua, our Puerto Rican sisters and brothers. People from everywhere in the United States, Hawaii. I know you're here. Thank you so much for waking up just to be with us, this early. So I'm so excited to have you all here together. So I just want to go through a couple of things. If you're ready to get started, let's just say, start by saying hello. So I've got a few things here for you. So we're going to be using the chat box a lot today because I want you guys to get to practice. So we'll start by saying hello. And you could do that, by simply typing in Tao, which I can tell you guys have already started doing. Depending on the time of day, you can say Taigüe, good day, buenos dias. Or maybe you can say Takahi, good afternoon, buenas tardes. Or maybe you can say Taikaraya, good night, buenas noches, depending on where you are. So take just a few moments to write in and say hello. So I've got a few people. Oh, aloha, Jan, all the way from Hawaii. Thank you so much. I've got hello, El Takahi. Takahi, David. Tao, Gray. Hello, hola. Oh, this is awesome. So that was a simple one, huh? That is great. Takahi Guaitiao. Thank you so much. And Takahi Rokotaranagu, since this is the afternoon on the East Coast. Very cool. Awesome. So that was an easy one, right? Super simple to do. So the next thing I want to do is let's introduce ourselves. So for example, you can say Dak'toká, and Dak is I, yo, and toka is am, is, are in Taíno Borikenaíki. And so I know this is a public setting, so if you don't feel comfortable sharing your name, you can, put in your Taino name if you've chosen one. Maybe you can put in your nationality. So, for example, I can say Dak'toká Boricua because my ancestors are from Boriken. Or maybe, Yamaye, Dak'toká Yamaye, I'm Jamaican Taino. Or maybe Dak'toká Quisqueyano, maybe you're from Quisqueya, Dominican Republic. Dak'toká Cubano. If you don't know how to say your nationality in Taino, you can just put it in whatever language you know it. So, if you want to say Dak'toká American, you can put that in there. I know a lot of times we do a lot of research to try to figure all of these things out, and a lot of the books I have don't necessarily have a full list of nationalities. So, feel free to, put in whatever word you can in another language. I had a wonderful community member who said, how do you call people who speak Spanish, English, and Taino? How like sometimes we call ourselves, we say that we speak Spanglish, and he's like, how do you say it if you speak all three? And he suggested Spanglino, which is amazing, Spanish, English, and Taino. So if you want to speak in Spanglino, please go ahead and do so. Okay, so let's take a look at some of your answers. Okay, very cool. Dak'toká Boricua. Yes, David. El Dak'toká, El, Ota Dak'toká Boricua. Awesome! So you're saying I am El and I am Boricua. Very good. Awesome. Jan, Dak'toká Americano. Very, very cool. Dak'toká Gray. Thank you, Gray. Oh, awesome. So we have Dak'toká Cubano, Ota Alemán, German. Yes, so you are Cuban and German. Awesome, awesome. And Dak'toká Boricua, American. Yes. Actually, I'm wondering if when we finally get a full list of nationalities, if we can actually use Americano, because that no at the end kind of goes really nicely with like Locono, Taino, because it used to be used as a word part meaning many people at the end of the name of a nationality or group of people. So I kind of like the fact that it goes really nicely. Very cool. And Sammy, Dak'toká Boricua, American, yep, and Dak'toká Boricua. So we have a lot of Boricua in the house. Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. The other thing you can use with Dak'toká, I am, you can put in some other characteristic of yourself. Because Dak'toká can mean things that are like permanent or temporary. So in Spanish, there are two verbs for that, ser and estar. So you can say like what you are permanently and then what you are temporarily, like I am sad, I'm not always sad, but you can use that same verb to mean that. So some other characteristics may be like Dak'toká Rokotara, I am a student, or Dak'toká Tekina, I am a teacher, Dak'toká Bibi, I am a mother, Dak'toká Baba, I am a father. So all of those things work really well together. Okay, very cool. Boricuas are brothers and sisters. Absolutely. I love that statement. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Taínos and all over the Caribbean and actually parts of Florida now, they've actually shown that Taínos actually also lived in the lower regions of Florida. We were all considered one family, and that's why you may have heard the chroniclers wrote down that every time they went to visit another island, people would come out and say, Taino, ni Taino, which actually may have meant more like, hey, my family, hello, welcome. So we really had that amazing camaraderie as family members. Even if we spoke slightly different variants of our language, we all considered ourselves family. So awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for participating in that. Oh, and Sammy says, Dak'toká Baba. Awesome, Sammy. So if you guys look in the chat, what Sammy did was he added in mat, right? Between the pronoun dak, I, and toka, the verb, and that negates the verb. That means that I am not a father. Yo no soy padre. So that's really cool. Yep, that's exactly right. So you can put that mat right before the verb, and that means I'm not that thing. And I think it was Sammy. I was having a conversation with you online. It may have been you or someone else where they were asking, can we add mat at the beginning of, let's say, like noun or an adjective to say not that thing? So yes, absolutely right. That's actually what our ancestors used to do. So I'll give you a couple of examples from history, and then I'll give you an example of how we can do it today. So there is a word, maboya. I'll type it in the chat so you guys can see it. Maboya. So maboya, if you look at the word parts, means ma, not, bo, which you've seen before, which means good, big, great, and ya means spirit. So it's literally saying not good spirit. It means evil spirit. So that's a word that was actually chronicled that our ancestors used to use. So we could use that same pattern to create new words. For example, in some Taino flavors, the word chali, which I'm going to write in the chat, chali, or if you were going to use the Taíno Borikenaíki spelling, it would be chali, like this with an X, and because we know that's a cha. So chali means happy. So if we were going to say unhappy or not happy, right? It's super simple. Ma, chali, not happy. And so we can use that. Once we start learning a lot of adjectives, you add the ma or the mat. Just in case because remember, we have so many Taino flavors. Some people use mat and some people use ma. But we understand what they mean. They mean not. So you can use mat chali or mat chali to mean unhappy or not happy. So that's a neat trick, right? So the more you know about these little word parts, the more you're able to kind of put them together and create new words. Yeah. And okay, cool. So somebody, a German Cuban is mapping is saying, oh, I knew bo from Boriken. Yes, that's correct. So you're going to see bo in a lot of words. So now that you know bo, you see it in Boriken, for example. You see it in bohike. You see it in maboya. You see it in boya. You're going to know what that meaning is. And so it helps you pick up on a lot of new words. Do you have a resource for learning the word parts? So funny. A lot of the different resources that I've been using have been either like online dictionaries that may have one little word part here, one little word part there, or you may find them in some of the books, but I don't know of anyone who's focused on them. And I think that's why I started doing this channel, honestly, is I go about thinking about languages in a different way, because I've actually been working with language programs for 20 years. And the way that I work with a lot of these difficult languages, so things like Baluchi, that was an oral language spoken in the Middle East, and it wasn't until the 1950s that they even got an alphabet, because it was an oral language. So the way that we go about teaching these languages that are very difficult is to chunk them up in small pieces and then use them to build up on each other. And what I started noticing when I was studying Taino is that almost all the words are made up of these little pieces. And my brain was like, oh my God, I'm seeing the pattern. Why is no one telling us about the patterns? So that's why I started doing this, because I was like, I'm seeing these patterns. So I'll give you another example. The word part B means a small beginning in life. And you see that word part in bibi, which means mother. So you're taking the word part, putting it, saying it twice, putting it together twice, which means like more emphasis. And you're basically saying bibi, mother, is like the beginning, the small part, the life, from where everything comes from. And then you see that, I saw it again in the word sibi. And sibi means small rock because siba means rock. And then I was like, whoa, like, why isn't anyone teaching that you can take these little parts and put them together and change words, right? So that's what I wanted to do. I can point you, Sammy, to some sources that have little ones, like they'll have B, for example, they'll have bo, but they don't, there's nothing that I've seen that like puts them all together. It was almost like I was going through like hunting, doing a little treasure hunt and like finding them and then using that to realize, oh man, I can learn this language so much easier if somebody just points these out. So awesome question. I'll try to, after this, I'll try to put in some resources that show some of them, but there's nothing that I've seen that is dedicated just to word parts. Oh, morning. Mabrika, Ramon, thank you so much for joining. Oh, you're welcome. And by the way, I'm saying you're welcome in English, but we're going to cover that today. So I'm going to answer that question. Thank you, Hahom Sami, for your wonderful questions. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's move on to the next practice that we can do here together. So the question is, Amana book, where are you? So if you've seen our video, you know that Amana means where, and book is the singular informal form of you. And so I'm asking Amana book, and you can answer Dak moon, I am in or at, and then you can fill in the blank with where you are. Again, you don't have to tell me exactly where you are. Maybe you just want to say, I am in or at my house. Estoy en casa. So then you would say, Dak moon boharak, or Dak moon bohio. Oh, El, Dak moon, Florida. Oh, very good. Awesome, awesome. In Florida, it was especially the lower regions are actually one of our ancestral homelands. I read the other day in researching that the original name that our Taino ancestors gave to Florida was Bimini. And I believe, if I don't get this incorrect, it means the beginning of the like, I think it was like el principio o la vida de las cascadas. It's like the beginning of the waterfalls. It was like the beginning of fresh water. It's super cool. Oh, awesome. Look at that. Look at where we are. Dakmoon, New Jersey. Oh, that's amazing. And Dakmoon, Missouri. Dakmoon, Kauai. Sorry, Jan. I'm mispronouncing Kauai. Okay, very cool. Dakmoon, California. Oh, that is so cool. Dakmoon, Bohio. Oh, that is so cool. So we are representing, most of the U.S. here. And myself, Dakmoon, New Hampshire, Estados Unidos, Darat. And that means I am in New Hampshire, United States. You can also fill in that blank, Dakmoon, I am in, yo estoy en, with a country name. So if you're in the United States, that is Estados Unidos, Darat. And you'll notice Arat, that last bit, means country. So this word is comprised of two parts, Estados Unidos and Arat. If you're in Boriken, for example, Dakmoon Boriken, yo estoy en Boriken, I am in Boriken. Or Dakmoon Quisqueya, or Dakmoon Haití. Or Dakmoon Kubanakan, or Dakmoon Yamayeca. Oh man, Super Mario, Dakmoon Califatzlan. I'm assuming that's somewhere in Mexico. I hope that I'm pronouncing that properly. Oh, no worries. Taikaraya. Thank you so much for joining. It's okay. You can catch this later on. I'll be posting this. Dakmoon Bohio in North Carolina. Oh, awesome. Another state represented. That is so cool. Okay, this is great. You guys are amazing audience. And by the way, I have to tell you, you guys keep me on my feet because I'm getting questions like, Some of you will write me in Taino, and I'm like, I haven't memorized that verb yet. I don't know what they mean. So thank you so much, because I am learning along with you. This is awesome. Very cool. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Supa. I did, Super Mario, I did pronounce that properly. Awesome. Very cool. And I believe you've been teaching me some Nahuatl online. So just want to let you know, so many of you are joining us who speak other languages too. You're, our indigenous cousins. So some of you are speaking Quechua and teaching me Nahuatl and looking at the comparisons of our languages. It's been truly amazing. Very cool. Dakmoon, St. Louis, Alu, Dakat, Boyukayek. Alu. I remember that one. Hold on a second. I've got my book right here. That is a preposition. It might be in my house, I believe. You are saying that. Because Boyukayek is city, right? Yep, La Ciudad, city. And you said Alu. Yep, in. Okay, very cool. So just in case you guys don't have it, this is a wonderful resource that you can use. I always keep it handy just to make sure that I can figure out what you guys are saying. And this is where I'm pulling a lot of our lessons from, because it makes it very easy. Very cool. Thank you, Sammy. Yes, we have to look it up. Yeah, absolutely. There's no problem having to look stuff up. No one said that, we're supposed to memorize all of Taino. Heck, I look up English words sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what that means, right? Oh, you were trying to say house. Okay, cool. So house can be a couple of words. So you can say, there's a word that means house, home. So you can say boharak, like I have on the screen, boharak. Or there's also bojillo, and sometimes spelled boillo with the Spanish H, silent H. So those are two ways that you can say home, house or home. Okay, I hope that helps. Awesome, you guys are great. Okay, next I have one last practice for you. And this one, I'm including something new, something I haven't taught on the videos yet, but I will very soon. So the new verb that you're learning is agama. Agama means to have or tener. So there's another word in this sentence. So agama is the verb. It comes right after book here. And there's another word here in the sentence that is new to you. It is bohimuru. So what I'm saying is buk agama hek bohimuru. That means you see you, book. Agama, to have. Hek, a, an, or one. And bohimuru, pet. So what I'm saying is, do you have a pet? Buk agama hek bohimuru. And one way that you can answer is saying, dak, yo, I, agama, heck, I have a, yo tengo un, and then you can fill in the blank with any animal that you know. So you can say, dak agama, heck, aon, I have a dog, yo tengo un perro. Or you can say, dak agama hek yamui, I have a cat, yo tengo un gato. Or dak agama hek caguama, or jicotea, or care. There are 3 different words for turtle so far that I've learned. Or you can say, dak agama hek wuchitibiri, which is small bird. Yo tengo un pájaro. So these are some ways that you can use to practice to tell me if you have a pet or not. Please feel free to type it in the chat box. And if you don't have any pets, then you can say, dak mat agama hek bohimuru. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to type in my answer in the chat box because I need to practice too. So dak mat agama. Okay. Hek bohimuru. So that is my response. I need to practice. Very cool. So in the meantime, let's start reading the responses. Okay, L. Dak'agama aonagu. Luna otalio. Oh, that is beautiful. So L is saying, I have dogs, Luna and Leo. I love it. That is so cute. Okay, David, Dak'agama hek aon. Very cool. So you have a dog too. And Jenny, Dak'agama hek aon. You have a dog. And Jan, Dak'agama hek jamuy. Jan has a cat. Yo tengo un gato. Very cool. And me, I don't have any pets. Dak mat agama hek bohimuru. I don't have a pet. And then Sammy, dak agama hek jamuy. Dak roli. Oh, that's lovely. So Sammy is saying, I have one cat. I love him. Beautiful. And Gray, Dak'agama hek aon, Dr. Watson. That's awesome. So Gray says, I have one dog, Dr. Watson. That's his name. That is so cool. Awesome. You guys are amazing. See how easy that was? Just putting things together and building up until, we'll be able to know so much by the end. We're just building and building and building. I gave an interview yesterday that it's going to be published on the week, if not the day of Indigenous Peoples Day in October. And at the end, the interviewer asked me to teach her a word or a phrase in Taino. So I taught tau, hello, guaitiao, friend, and then she says, oh, how do you say thank you? And I told her ha home, and then all of a sudden, like right there in front of me, she says, oh, ha home guaitiao, right there. She'd already started creating her own sentences. So I think that is the beauty of this language, is that we can learn little pieces and then put them together and quickly start speaking. So thank you guys so much. So that was it for our practice. I just wanted to do something that was real quick and easy for our first time around. Oh, so hold on one second. I see a sentence coming in from our co-founder. He says, we love our garden and flowers and our conuco. So what if I had to say that in Taino? Well, I would say, I'm going to type it in the chat box. Guac ro guac at. Ah, you're making me type today, aren't you? Guacat maina ota anna nagu. Let me make sure I got that right. And then ota guac at conuco. Okay, yeah, so if we were to say that in Taino, we love our garden and flowers and our conuco, it would be guac ro, we love, guacat maina, our garden, ota ana nagu, and flowers. Ota and guacat conuco, our conuco, our farmland. Okay, very good, thank you. Sammy, is there a way to say it is that? Okay, awesome question. I think I saw it come in, but I haven't had a chance to respond to it. The book that we're reading, Primario Básico del Taíno Borikenaíki, does not have an it in it. There is no it. There's only he, she, and then there is nahak, which it means they, but I propose that nahak can also be used for like not specifying a gender, like the English they that sometimes doesn't specify gender. I haven't seen an it, and I have to tell you, in many indigenous languages, nothing is it, because our ancestors thought of everything as being alive. So everything had life in it. Nothing was it. Everything was a yabisi, a tree, a flower, ana. They all had life in it. And actually, that's one of the things that I've heard many elders talk about, many indigenous elders. They say, by eating things, by saying it, we are taking what is precious, what connects us to nature around us, and making it as if it's an object, right? And we are not giving it the respect that it deserves. And then we can do things, by eating things, we can do things like chopping entire forests and not giving it the respect that it's a life, it's a soul. And actually, our Taino ancestors thought and believed deeply that trees were souls. They had souls just like us, and they could communicate with us. And actually, so I grew up, and my mother had a green thumb. She loved flowers. We lived in a small apartment, but she had flowers and plants that grew everywhere, including an orange tree. And I don't know how that happens, like in the winter, but she took really good care of them. And one of the things she did was she would talk and sing to the flowers and her plants. And she told me growing up, she's like, oh no, like you really should talk and sing to them. They really need that communication. So it's like it's a strong belief in our ancestors that everything around us had a life. So in many indigenous languages, you will not find a word for it. What I've seen some Taino flavors do is they'll use like a new form, like in this book that I am actually starting to go through. Give me 1 second if I can pull it up for you guys. So Keeping the Taino Language Alive, I've started going through that. And he gives it a form. It is L-I, li. Very similar to our leek, actually, but it's just L-I. Sometimes I'm proposing that we use, like in Spanish, you don't have to use the pronoun, like he, she, it. You can just use the verb, like está, right? You're just saying is. And I propose that we use toka, like is, to just say it is. But that's just my own personal opinion. I am not the expert. I have not like created, I'm not in charge of creating rules. But I think if you use something like toka and then add something at the end, that would serve well. I mean, it means is or are or está or es. So I think it's pretty appropriate, and I think everyone would understand what you're saying. Let's see. Let's take a look. Let's see. Dacro Yabisi Nagu Sequoia in California. Yes, the trees. I love trees. The sequoia in California. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Sammy, for the question. So I would recommend looking at some other Taino flavor books, see what they use. I would recommend using just toka, like is, are, está, es, and I think it would be understood. Speaking of other Taino flavors, I want to address one question that always comes up when we start learning Taino. There's so many different flavors. Like there's one group creating one book here, one group creating another book here. There is, like different yukayeke in different parts are creating their own flavors. Some people prefer to stick more closely with borrowing Ilocano words. Some people prefer to use kalinago or yeri. Some people prefer using wayu. What I found is, number one, the mindset of like who's right, who's wrong. I know that's really hard for us, especially when you're learning something new. You're like, well, what's right? What is it? My mindset is everything is right, learn it all. I've been working with languages for so long that even the most established languages, I mean, you can find different speakers who are like, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. It's like, you're all right. Let's just learn it all. So I worked in a company in publishing for almost a decade, and I worked with people from all over Latin America. So we had Mexican speakers, Argentine speakers, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Americans, so even people who had studied in Spain. And so we would all sit there sometimes and we would compare. So what do you say? What do you say? And in the end, it didn't matter what each of us said. What mattered was who was the program directed to? Was it a group of students in Texas? If that is, if that's the textbook where it's going to be, then we needed to include more Mexican Spanish terms rather than like a Cuban term or a Puerto Rican term. If it was a science book that was directed for kids, high school kids in Boriquen, Puerto Rico, then we had to use those terms. So I had to learn all the different flavors as much as possible. So if I'm talking to students who have more of a Mexican background, I will say bote de basura, which is a trash can. If I was talking to somebody, let's say from Argentina, I would say latón de basura. What word is correct for swimming pool? Pileta, alberca, or piscina. They're all correct. You just have to learn them all. So what I found that in my studies is, I'm going to pull up some books here that I have. So I started studying the Primario Básico del Taíno Borikenaíki because the grammar more closely resembles our current grammar, English and Spanish, in the placement of the words. So it always starts with a subject, then a verb, then an object, like I love you, right? Then I started reading, for example, Keeping the Taino Language Alive, and I realized that he uses a slightly different grammar. So he uses what most indigenous languages use, which is a little flipped around. It's usually object, subject, verb. So I'll give you an example. Instead of saying, I love you, dak'ro book, right? He would say, book. He would say, bu da ro, which is you, I love. And that is true of many indigenous languages. They flip it, so they put the object as the first thing. Why? Because they're actually saying you are more important than the subject I. So you're saying it is you who I love. It's a beautiful sentiment if you think about it, right? But what I found is the Primario Básico book is a nice kind of like easy way to ease into the language. And then when I opened the other book, I realized, oh, I learned so many of the basics that I can pick out the words that I know, even if it's a little flipped around. So it then helps you kind of build up and learn something a little bit more complicated. So that's just my advice is, start with one, then you'll be able to pick up on other ones. And I had to change my own mindset of like, who's right to, oh, it's okay, I'll learn it one way, and then I'll learn it the other way, and then I'll learn it the other way. So that is, I hope that helps you guys as well. Let's see. I'm going to take a look at our chat box to see what other questions are coming in. Bogus, bogus maybe means to live, to live. Oh, okay, or life or to live. Okay, thank you, Ramon. I love to compare Spanish with my friends from Mexico and Nicaragua. Yes, it is so cool when you start comparing. Let's see, Super Mario, do you think there could be some African language words such as Igbo or Yoruba that could have been incorporated to the Arawakan language? I know the Garifuna and yes. Oh, I love that question. Absolutely. So I gotta tell you, when you're speaking English, you're not speaking English. Why do I say that? Well, because English is just includes so many terms from so many other languages. So it includes some terms from the Celtic languages of Ireland and Scotland. It includes terms from Latin. It includes terms from German. It includes terms from French. It includes terms from Spanish. Every language in the world has come together to create, oh, and by the way, Taino. We know that, right? Taino is also incorporated into English. So every language in the world has contributed to the creation of the English language. The same is true for every language. There is no way that there is a quote-unquote pure language. It does not exist. Can we just like get it out there? A pure language does not exist. Spanish, by the time the Spaniards came to the quote-unquote New World in 1492, their language wasn't pure. What are they talking about? Their language was a mix of the Arabic influence because the whole part of southern Spain had been a caliphate for hundreds of years, an Arabic speaking, ruling caliphate. They had influence from German and French in the north, from the Celtic languages. So every language is a confluence of languages. So to answer your question, could the African languages have influenced us? Yes, absolutely they did. I actually have a sample. Somebody asked me this, so I'm going to pull it up. Somebody asked me in one of our comments, what does ají aya bombe mean? And I had never heard that. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this Taino? So I looked it up, and the answer that I found was that this was a cri de guerre, a war cry, un grito de guerra, that was used by, most people think, Guarionex, Cacique Guarionex, during the 1511 rebellion of the Taínos on Boriken. And that rebellion was led by Agüebaná II of Boriken. Now, this Guarionex was the cacique of Magua, Haití, Quisqueya, but he also went over to Boriken, and he ended up being the cacique of Otoao, Boriken, which is now called Utuado. Now, this saying, ají haya bombe, better dead than a slave, mejor muerto que esclavo. Let's take a look at the words themselves, and this will go to your answer. So when I look at this, I say, okay, some of these words look Taino, and I know they are because ají, actually, there's a couple of definitions for that, or uses of that. Ají is the name of a hot pepper, but ají is also used as an onomatopoeia. An onomatopoeia is a word that expresses a sound like buzz, right? Ají was used to express pain, like when you say "ay" or "ouch," it hurts. So ají, that's what it means. And so I said, okay, yeah, I know what that means. Could it be used as a word cry? Yeah, it could use to express deep emotion or feeling. Aya bombe. I have seen aya in other places. I don't know the exact translation, but bombe, to me, I was like, bombe? That construction seems like it's of African descent, right? I've heard of bomba and bombe and bembe, like that construction. I don't know what the exact meaning of it is, but to my ears, it sounds like it may have come from our African ancestors. And that is probably correct because we know that in many of the rebellions of the Taínos, for example, in Guarocuya's rebellion in Haití, Quisqueya, by the time he rebelled, his soldiers had also included Africans who were runaway slaves who had been taken in by the Taínos. So it is very much possible that to communicate, you start borrowing each other's words. And by a certain time, African languages had already been incorporated into the Taino words. The Spanish language, for example, the French, the English, our islands have so many influences from so many European languages, and it just naturally starts occurring. So the answer to your question is yes, I'm pretty sure by the early 1500s, many languages had already started mixing. And I don't think we can ever get to a place where it's like, well, this is purely Taino. Well, what is purely anything? What is pure Spanish? What is pure English? There's nothing pure about language. The whole point is to learn the thing that you need to use to communicate and use that. I mean, nowadays, our language changes all the time. For example, English has become the lingua franca, like the most common language. I was in Spain a few years ago, and I noticed there were Swedish tourists, American tourists, people from all over the world, and the language we were using to communicate amongst all of us was English. So English has started, for example, being introduced, tech terms, science terms, etc., into many different languages. So, sorry, long story short, yes, I think the answer to your question is yes. And then has a big influence from Africa? Absolutely. We know for a fact our African ancestors, just from the fact of being present on our islands, influenced the way we are. Everything from our dances to our cooking, to our rituals, spirituality, to our language has been incorporated. Very cool. Oh, Elle, are we going to learn numbers or colors soon? Yes, yes, yes. So actually next week comes, I have the video on colors coming out. So I try to do these ahead of schedule and then just post them. So the colors are coming out next week. Should we get the book if we don't speak Spanish? I do want to learn and can read a fair amount. Yeah, it's helpful. A few people have actually written and said, I don't speak Spanish that well, but I'm using it because I know some Spanish and I'm able to look up like verbs, for example. So it is helpful. I wish he would translate it into English. That would be even more helpful. And really, that's the reason why I started doing the videos in English first, is because I knew that there's so many of us in the diaspora around the world that we probably needed to, I wanted to reach those people first and then start with the Spanish videos. And I did start posting the videos in Spanish as well for anyone who's more comfortable. Oh, can you write the war cry down? Yeah, absolutely. I'll write it here so that you can have it. Ahi aya bombe. There it is. Very cool. I know you're teaching grammar and language, but is there a plan about going on to history? I would love to learn more about Atabe, Huracan, and Yukiyu. Yes, absolutely. So I have been peppering the language videos with some like culture and some, book recommendations, songs, and things like that. So I did allude to Mother Atabe, Bibi Atabe, in a few of the videos, especially the ones that I talked about, the similarities between the Tainos and the Navi in the movie Avatar. I will go into more of the our creation stories, our cemis, for example, Mother Atabe, Huracan, which is actually the physical manifestation of Atabe, and her other persona, Guaban Sex, which is, Atabe is like mothering, Mother Nature, comfort, and Guaban Sex is her like avatar, the other side of her, where she comes in, destroys anything that no longer serves us so that we can start anew. So I will be going into those things, and also Yukiyu, also known as Yugahu, etc. So I've alluded to, for example, Yugahu in one of our videos, but I will go into those with more detail. I also recommend, I don't believe I have it with me, I think I have it in my bookcase behind me. If you want to learn the creation stories in a way that, like, very surprising actually, in a way that they relate to the physical realm, I would recommend, oh my gosh, what is the book? Mitología y Religión de los Taínos, Mythology and the Religion of the Taínos. He takes the creation stories, compares them to others from our South American cousins, and talks about how they were used as a way to show their astrology calendar system. So the creation stories were a way to transmit information in an easy to digest way, easy to remember, so then you knew where the positions of the stars were in the spring, in the fall, in the summer. It's pretty amazing. So I would recommend that you read that book. That is super helpful. If you want to get started right away to hear some of the information from the spiritual point of view, I would recommend Miguel Sague, and I'm going to type his name in the chat box. So Miguel Sague started out in the 80s, and he has a YouTube channel. So he actually created the Kane Circle. It is a spiritual circle, and he posts things about spirituality, the creation stories fully narrated with visuals, and you can find them on YouTube. Super easy to follow, and you can read some of the background. And the Ganei Circle has a website with tons of blogs information as well, but I will be adding some of the YouTube videos along as well. Um, and L, yes, Bruja Cat has a series about cemis or cemies. Bruja Cat has been going through and talking specifically about each one, Atabe, Yugahu, all of them. Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, yes, yes. So my other half is saying a big shout out to Bruja Cat as well for her amazing work. Yes. So Bruja Cat is like honestly she has been doing such amazing work, reaching out to people, letting them know about our channel. So I started posting in March of this year. In I think it was April, she came across the channel because she was doing her own research, and she said, "Oh my God, like you only have 17 subscribers," and I was just sitting there going, "17 people, yes, 17 people. I've reached 17 people," and she's like, "I need to post about you." So she went on TikTok, posted about me. I didn't know her. I was like, "Oh yeah, well thank you." Like I didn't expect anything, and within like 24 hours, like the numbers were ticking up. We were up by like 600, 700 people. And I was sitting there like amazed. So Bruja Cat, much love. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because of your efforts, you have, more people are finding us, more people are learning the language. And that is really my goal here, is get Taino out, get people to know more of our language. So thank you so much. I really so appreciate it. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, awesome. I love the Ganei Circle. They're on my bookmark. Yes, they're really good. And I'm praying for rain for California fires. Yes, absolutely. I am too. The saddest part is that our indigenous ancestors regularly, for example, would use the slash and burn method. So they would go around, they would set intentional fires so that, the grounds would be ready for planting. And so because of that, because of global warming and many other reasons, now we have these horrific wildfires that are going around that are not controlled. So we pray that, this could be contained and that everyone stays safe. Thank you. Um, let's see. Great. I've been joining Irka Mateo Sacred Taino Healing for Zoom circles. It's been wonderful. Yes, I haven't yet, and I really want to. So I'm glad you're telling me, because I think that's another push for me to do it. I've started making coloring books for kids to learn Taino words. Oh, you're touching me, Elle. That's amazing. Guys, I really love the fact that almost everyone that has started watching us has started doing their own work, and that's really my goal. Is I'm planting the seed. You guys take it, run with it. Elle is doing coloring books. That's amazing. Someone else is doing workbooks for teenagers. Someone else is posting their own YouTube videos on a weekly, daily basis. That's amazing. That's exactly what we need to be doing, because I can reach 1,500. Well, imagine if that 1,500 just reach one more person. We're already doubled at 3,000. Those 3,000 reach another one person each. That's how we spread the word that Taino is here, that we're still here, that we still exist. So thank you so much. I love that you're doing your own work, and honestly, that's what I hope that I can do, is encourage others to continue it, because I know that I'm one light, but if I can help light another light, and you guys are another light, we're gonna light up the whole world, and that's really what I want to do. So I know we're at the hour mark, but I do feel like I need to share some of the most essential questions that I've received from you that I haven't addressed yet in videos, just to share with you today, because I think they will be helpful in you developing your Taino skills right away. So there are a couple of questions that I've received about doing more conversations, and I will be making more videos with more conversations. So let me see. One question that I've received is a pretty important one. How do you say goodbye, adios? Because it's a basic one that I have, it's hard to find good answer to, because I've actually been researching this a lot, and in all the books or the dictionaries that I've looked at, there's nothing that just says how to say goodbye. So I think I have an answer. So actually, before I move to the answer, let's take a look at what goodbye and adios actually mean. Have you stopped to think what they mean? So goodbye is a shortened English word that actually comes from a phrase. A long time ago, people didn't say goodbye. They said, God be with ye. It's God be with you. That's what it means. And when you look at the Spanish, what does the Spanish mean? Adios, to God. I commend you to God. So God be with you. Literally, that's what these words mean. But we use it now as a greeting when we are about to leave somewhere, right? We have a Taino word for that. We have a phrase. It's called Taino ti, literally meaning God be with you, que Dios esté contigo. So I think we have the perfect phrase for this. So when we say goodbye, we can just say Taino ti and then take our leave, right? So just wanted to share that with you. That will help you with some of the conversations that you may be wanting to partake in. Let's see. Oh, thank you so much, David. I love helping to share the Taino language. Thank you. Thank you for posting that. Ha home. Okay. Let's go to another one. I just said ha home. Why don't we talk about that? So this one is simple, but there are two ways that you can say thank you, gracias. Okay. One way, like Lady Martinez just said, ha home, thank you, gracias, right? Another way is to say bo matum. And bo matum is a way to say you're very generous, es o eres muy generoso, generosa. What does it actually mean? Look at the bo, like great, big. That's what it means. Matum. Matum is actually the verb to share. So what you're actually saying is you share a lot. You're greatly generous. And you're telling somebody thank you because they're so generous to you. So hahom or bo matum can be used. So thank you so much. And I know a lot of you know that because you've been using it in the chat. Now, the question that I usually get after that is, well, if I know how to say thank you, how do I say you're welcome? And this is another one that I have not seen in dictionaries. And actually, before I move on, I see a great question. Is hahom, spelling of hahom, correct as well? Okay, very cool. Thank you for the question. So hahom with J, so I'm going to just spell it, follows the conventions of the Taíno Borikenaíki book. Okay, in the Taíno Borikenaíki book, the alphabet that he proposes, and let me see if I can pull up the alphabet here so you guys see. Let me see if he has it available. I'm trying to figure out if I can share my screen, but I may not be able to see the alphabet that he proposes. But if you go into the Taíno Borikenaíki book, let me see 1 second. I want to make sure that I don't lose your chat here. Okay, let me just open it up here. The Taíno Borikenaíki book proposes using a variation of the Spanish language alphabet, but condensing it a bit so that you don't need to use every letter. So it's actually here, and the alphabet he uses is here, and he actually goes through and talks about the pronunciation of all of these. So one of the things you can do is if you look at, let me see if I have this available. So if you look at the Let's Talk Taino 2, the Taino alphabet, I go through and I show the pronunciation of all of these letters that he includes in his alphabet. I like the alphabet because it's condensed, so you don't have to guess whether you should use a C, a K, or a Q. It's always K. C and Q are not included. They're not necessary. But he uses specifically the Spanish pronunciation and for some of the things that you hear. So for example, your question was, is hahom with an H, H-A-H-O-M, or is it J-A-J-O-M? It's both. So if you use the Spanish Borikenaíki, Taíno Borikenaíki alphabet and letters, you would use the J because that is the only H sound using that alphabet. If you use a different spelling convention, let's say based more on an English alphabet, then you can use the J. Then you can use the H. What I decided to do was use the Borikenaíki alphabet because there is never a confusion. I never have to sit there going, is it a H with a J or a H with an H? Because the H isn't even included in that alphabet. So it takes away the confusion of letters that could have the same sound, right? So in the end, whether somebody spells it with an H or a J right now, that's okay. You understand it, right? I understand it. Some people may even say hahoma instead of hahom. I understand them and I know what the meaning is, so I understand the variation. So I hope that answers the question. Yes. Okay, L, yes, absolutely. So you're welcome is a phrase that does not exist in some languages, such as American Sign Language. Ooh, very cool, yes. And actually, let's go back to you're welcome. It is a phrase that I have not really found only in a couple of instances. So you're welcome and de nada or por nada, or even in French de rien, it really, the connotation is you're welcome to whatever I have. It's like literally, I will give you what I have. Or de nada or por nada or de rien mean I would do it for anything. So it's really like, it's nothing, right? So I propose a couple of ways of saying that. The informal way would be something like it's nothing, which is actually one of you, I believe, one of our members who speaks Nahuatl, I had actually said, actually in Nahuatl we say like it's nothing. So I propose, and this is not approved by anyone, but I propose we use toka mayani. Mayani literally means nothing in Taino. That was written down by the chroniclers. And toka we know is. So toka mayani, it's nothing, it's nada, like no big deal. So that's like an informal way of saying it. A more formal way of saying that I have seen many people use, and you know it's a little bit more formal, but you can use it in many instances, is nabori Dak'toká. And so I do want to point out the United Confederation of Taino People, Confederación Unida del Pueblo Taino, has tons of resources available online, and they have used a lot of these like more formal translations that I do use as resources as well. So they use nabori Dak'toká in answer to thank you. So let's break it down. Nabori or naboria is a word that was used by our ancestors to mean a servant, a follower, to show respect to someone else. It doesn't mean a literal servant like I am in your household serving you. It just means that I am at your service, that sort of thing. Da, in many Taino flavors, is like our dak, that means yo, I, me. And ka is the last part of toka. So some people just like smush them together and say daka, I am, yo soy, not Dak'toká. So it's just the last part of ka and of toka. And some people use ka to mean am is are, while they use am is, while they use to mean are. So they try to like split it up. But just so you know that you know where some of this stuff is coming coming across from. In the Taino Borikenaíki book, we use the full verb toka and we don't change it, just so that it's easier to understand. So, nabori Dak'toká, literally, your servant, I am. And what does it mean? It means I am at your service. Yo estoy a sus órdenes, which is the same feeling that you are saying when you say de nada, por nada, you're welcome to whatever I have. It's like, I will do anything, I'm at your service. And so this is a nice, more formal way of saying it. So if we were to use this in Borikenaíki, we would say Dak'toká nabori or Dak'toká naboria. And that's understood as being a more formal way of saying you're welcome. Okay, very cool. And got it, very interesting. Cool. Jan asks, is that why some people say Taino Dak'toká? Yes, that is correct. So that is why some people say Taino Dak'toká, which means Taino I am. And if you were to flip it around and use Borikenaíki, it would be Dak'toká Taino. And that's the same way of saying that. It's a different way of saying that. There's actually a really cool series, like a children's series that they came up with just like a year ago. I think I'll have to find it and put it in the comments. It's like an animated movie that came out, and it's actually called Dak'toká Taino. I found it and I was like, why hasn't it received as much promotion? It's a full movie, and I think it was published by like a pretty big production company, and it was called Dak'toká Taino. So they're teaching children the Borikenaíki as well. Well, thank you for that question. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out if there are any other questions that I think we should address before we leave. Let's talk about this one. This one was interesting too. So as we just talked about, there's so many things that maybe our ancestors didn't use, or they haven't been written down. But I want to teach you how you could possibly say the same or something similar using the available language we have. So one of them is, how do you say fast, rápido, veloz? How do you say that in Taino? And I had to do a little research, and I was like, I can't find a word for fast. I even wrote other people who are posting about the language, and I was like, do you know a way to say this? And they're like, yeah, we don't know either. So I did a little bit more digging, and I used the book, the Taino Borikenaíki book, to look up other words maybe that were similar. And I noticed something. There was a word that meant speed, and I have the preposition with. So like with speed means fast, right? Con velocidad. So I put those words together, and I found abo, akua. Abo is with, akua is speed or velocidad. So an example of this, if I wanted to say, you run fast, tú corres rápidamente, or tú corres rápido, you can say, buk awatawa abo akua. You run with speed, tú corres con velocidad. And you're saying this, you're expressing the same idea, but just using our words, or a different phrasing of it. So one of the things that I worked on when I was in publishing, so I actually worked for the official translator of Dr. Seuss. I had the pleasure of working with her. She's an amazing author and translator. And you can imagine translating Dr. Seuss into Spanish is like a crazy difficult job, right? Dr. Seuss invented words. Dr. Seuss was all in rhyme, and it's just like you can't really translate that. So one of the things that we had to become really skilled at was editing for feeling and for transmitting the idea into words that work in Spanish, because English is not the same as Spanish. And if you're trying to rhyme in English, you can't use those same words to rhyme in Spanish. And then if on top of that you have something that didn't exist in English at all, that was invented, you have to find something similar in Spanish that will give the same idea. So just working with that and understanding that you're not going to find something exact, that you have to adapt it to your language, was a skill that that I was just like in awe that my boss had. But then working with that and being an editor and saying, okay, what is the idea that we're trying to get across here? How do we change it a little bit so that it works in Spanish, and then still maintains the rhyme, because that's one of the most important things in a Dr. Seuss book. That gave me that kind of experience to then, when you're translating something from English or Spanish into Taino, how do we do it so we get the same idea across? So that's something that I wanted to share with all of you. I hope that helps. Okay, so let me know if there are any other questions that you guys have on and in the chat. Let's see. I think we're about the time where I want to start wrapping up. So I want to share with you some amazing things that are going on. And let me just put this chat box over here. Let's see, restore chat. And because I want to share my screen with you guys and just show you a couple of things. So the first thing is, so here's the amazing thing that has been going on that I wanted to share with you today. A few months ago, one of our community members reached out to me and said, is there anything I can do to help? I need to be able to practice speaking. Can we do something along those lines? And so I was like, honestly, I'm just trying to put out the content. I don't know if I can start, study groups or anything like that. So he volunteered to do that. So he started his own webpage. And so I want to introduce you guys to some of the amazing work that he's doing. And so he started a group called Taíno Corner. You can find it on Facebook. And I'm going to navigate to it on my end and share my screen too so that you guys can see it. So Angel Luis Estrada IV started Taíno Corner. If you join the group, he will be setting up study groups sessions so that you guys can do it live. So you're using the videos that we post and then coming together and studying together so you can actually practice live. He may be using a site like Zoom or something else that allows you guys to do work as a large group, or maybe even like breakout rooms so you can work together with partners. And so a lot of the videos that I'm doing, that I've been releasing, have been geared toward that. So you'll notice I've started saying things like, if you're doing a group, you might want to use this in this activity. So my work right now is going to be more geared toward teaching people so they can use the videos by themselves, or if they're working in a group, here's some activities that you can do together. So I want to share my screen with you just so you can see the page. So all you have to do is search under Facebook for Taíno Corner, and you'll come right to his page. You can join, and he's already posted here, welcoming everyone. And then he will let you guys know when you are meeting. And I'm going to grab this link and I'm going to put it in the chat also so that you guys can see it. And let me just take a quick look and I'll make sure I don't lose anything here. Oh yes, Elle, you already joined. That's amazing. Here's the link to the Facebook page. So feel free to join. He'll reach out to you, set up the groups so you can practice together. This is a sister group. Honestly, there's just so much that I'm trying to do right now that I couldn't do the study group, but this is one way that you can do it. If you're inclined to, you can start your own study group, depending on where you are. What if you want to meet face-to-face with people, in your state? You can start your own study group. Just let me know, and I can also talk about it, link to it, just let the community know. I feel like we can all do our effort and put together our own groups if we want to. This is a great way to just start chatting with people and being able to practice and communicate. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Let me see. A couple of other things I just wanted to share. So I'm going to share my screen because this is one of the questions that I get all the time. The question is, for practicing speaking in Taino, how do I know how to pronounce things properly? So as I mentioned, take a look at the Let's Talk Taino 2, which shows you how to pronounce each letter and then gives you an example word. But an even better thing, so if you go to Omniglot, the conscript section specifically for Taino, you're going to see this. You'll scroll down. So at the top of the page, you'll see something like the Nahuatl Taino alphabet, information on that. But if you scroll down here, you're going to see sample text. So this is the text in one of the Taino scripts. this is the transliteration. That is the text that uses our alphabet, so you know how he's pronouncing it. But look at this. There's an audio button, and you can listen to Javier Hernandez actually speak these words. And this is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You can see it here in English, in Taino, and in Taino script. And I believe if you scroll down, you can also see it in Spanish. Oh, you can only see actually the Borinqueña in Spanish, but I thought he had an example of it in Spanish. I guess not. But let's take a look at this. And so this is really cool. You can actually hear him. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it through my speakers now. Yeah, you can actually hear him. So just play the audio, follow along with the text, and you'll be able to hear someone saying an entire paragraph in Taino. And as you go through, you'll be able to pick up on little words. Like we know ota means and. Look at that. It's right there. Ara means people or person. And look, nagu, plural. So you know that's like human beings, people, right? So you'll be able to go through and kind of pick out the words that you know. You probably know nahak agama, right? They have. So it's kind of cool just to be able to look at that. And you're like, oh my gosh, I already know so much Taino, even though I've only been speaking it for a little bit. So I just wanted to point that out to you as well. Let's see. And let me actually, I'll give you the link to Omniglot so you can hear him speaking Taino fluently. It's so cool. The first time I came across that, I sent it to one of my colleagues. So she's married to a Dominican, and they are teaching their kids English, Spanish, and a little bit of Taino as well, using some of my books that I published. And I sent her the link to the audio, and he was like, she was like, he sounds like he's speaking Taino, like he was born speaking it. And I was like, yeah, it's amazing. So if this is what he can do, writing the book, I know that we can do that. So I am so excited about that. So one last thing I wanted to share, if you want to get involved, of course, there's so many organizations out there, but one of the ones that I look at, I mentioned during our session here, mentioned the United Confederation of Taino People, Confederación Unida del Pueblo Taino. They have so many things available, and they have Facebook pages and a bunch of other stuff that has not just like cultural information, things about areitos or powwows that they are going to be, hosting in different areas. They have representatives in, I believe, almost every state, so you can get involved with them. They teach so much about culture, about indigenous representation. I don't know if you guys know of Cacique Roberto Mucaro Borreiro. He actually leads this group. I believe he may still be leading the group. And he worked at the UN on the first day of World Indigenous Peoples Day. He and others worked to make that happen. So they've been working at this, since the 80s and 90s. So this is a wonderful group to just learn a little bit more. And they do a lot of postings. They have things like the Did You Know files, blog posts where they talk about language and culture. And they've been a really great resource for some of these things that I have not found in any book. They may have published it. So they're a really good resource, and I wanted to recommend them to you as well. So just wanted to let you know that. Let me see if there are any questions going on in our chat. I don't see anything else. Thank you. That's very interesting. You're very welcome. I'm happy to share any resources that you have, that I may have. Okay. So any other questions that you guys have for me today before we kind of log off? I know we've gone over our time, but I have a lot of fun talking about this stuff, and I hope that you do too. If you remember something else later that you want to share, please feel free to write it in the comments and I'd be happy to answer it for you. If there are things that I can't think of right away, I will do my research and I'll find it for you and post it. There are lots of fun things going on right now with Taino. Just one last thing I wanted to share with you guys. I have a lot of videos coming up that delve more into like the colors, for example. I'll talk about more animals and their environment, so you can talk a little bit more about that. We'll do some things on numbers. We'll do things on Taino scripts, right? Like how to write in a different form that isn't just like the ABCs, the romanization transliteration that we write in. So one is recently, Javier Hernandez, the author of Borikenaíki book, he created and published a Taíno keyboard that is now available on iPhones, not Androids just yet, but it's available on iPhones. And it uses a different kind of writing system, so it doesn't look like our ABCs, our transliteration. But that's interesting, and you can download it on the Apple Store. So that's really cool. A lot of you are going in and trying it out. I have been teaching using transliteration romanization, that is our ABC alphabet, because in many programs you want to start with that because it's easier for somebody to learn a new language using that. I have a whole video based on like the reasonings for starting with something like that, and then you can move on to a script like the new keyboard that Javier Hernandez published. I don't know when he intends to put it on the Android or publish it for the Android devices, but I suggest that you also follow him on Facebook because that's where I've seen him posting as well. So I follow him too. There are a lot of like amazing things that have been happening that I wanted to let you know about. So because I started publishing these videos, one reconnecting Taino, who's an engineer, he asked the person he's mentoring to reach out to me. So these two indigenous people reached out to me, and they created a robot to teach kids Navajo, Ojibwe, Moan, and Taino. And that is just like so amazing to think that we are going from a language that has been like in almost complete silence for the last 530 years to now possibly having a robot to teach kids to speak Taino, and they're hearing it. So I was just so extremely excited to be collaborating with them on that. And they're exhibiting that robot this very weekend at an Indigenous Peoples Engineering Conference. So I'm so excited about it. There's so many things going on that I know that we're bringing back Taino. We're going to do this together. So I just want to let you guys know about that as well. Oh my gosh. Oh, cool. David, it looks like you are using the Taino script that Javier published. Very cool. So you can see that David already posted something in the Taino script. A renaissance is happening. Yes, it really is happening, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Jan. Thank you. I'm so glad you're enjoying the classes. What is a question that drives your research? What is a question that drives your research? I guess I want to know a little bit more about that. What is something you really want to know? That's a great question. So the reason why I started this really came in at a time in my life where I was having like a paradigm shift. It was a time that I could really start thinking about like, who am I really? Why is it that I do the things I do? Why is it that I behave a certain way? And it came at a time where I was like, hey, I know I'm Taino. I have known this my whole life. I'd even taken a DNA test to kind of prove it. I'd seen little things happening here and there that were like, wait, this is real. We've always been here. And so it came at a time in my life where I was asking myself and trying to seriously answer these questions about who I am. Because for many of us, we've grown up with the idea, our parents will say, well, you're obviously you have indigenous African and European descent. but that's it. Like, that's the end of the story, because history and, you know, governments tell us that Tainos went extinct and they didn't exist. And so when I was asking these questions to myself, like, who am I? Like, what am I meant to be doing? It became very obvious right away that I needed to do some like major soul searching, and I needed to reconnect to those parts of me that had always been there, that were kind of like seeking to connect, but you know, I didn't have the information. So that's where my research started. Honestly, I kind of did the things that most people who start seeking these like more existential questions do. So I started, it was more like a spiritual journey for me. I started journaling and meditating. Um, and so while I was in these like meditation sessions, I started receiving sort of guidance like, you should start painting again. You should start writing again. You had an idea for a novel. You should start writing that. And so, like, as I started getting these, like, quote unquote, ideas or guidance, I realized that in like putting pen to paper, I needed to know more Taino. And so, because I have this idea in my head that eventually it will be published as a novel, that required Taino in it. And so, when I started doing my research, that's like became the driving force. Is like, I need to know the language because I would like to know how our ancestors communicated. Like, how did they view the world? And actually, that's one of the reasons I love languages. Some people love languages because they just want to visit a country, right? Some people love languages because they love to know the grammar, because that they find that fascinating. I like to learn languages because I like to see how people think. Like, human psychology has always been important to me. I studied a lot of that when I was studying education and teaching children. So that's what was the driving force, is how did our ancestors think? Did they think the same things we did? Like, what did they value? And so that was the driving force. So the question that I was trying to answer is, who am I? Like, that's the actual question I'm trying to answer. Who am I? And so in order to learn who I am, I need to know who my ancestors were. I needed to know what they valued, what was important to them. And then I could say, oh, okay, like, I see that I value the same things. Like, I grew up in like the suburbs, but I've always loved to farm. Like, why did I always like want to be around plants and farming? Like, there's certain things about me that didn't quite make sense until I started like learning about my ancestors, and I was like, oh, that totally makes sense now. Like, that's why I value that, and that's why I don't value that. And so I was trying to answer the question, who am I? There's a beautiful quote that is, without roots, a tree cannot grow. And so what does that mean? It means you cannot flourish if you don't know where you come from. And if you apply that to our ancestors, that is even a more beautiful, significant quote, because they truly believed that the tree was the connection, the Ceiba tree was the connection between the world of Yaya, the great spirit, the world of the living, earth, and the world of your ancestors, those who have passed on, Kwai Bai. So, like, the branches, the trunk, and the roots. And so, without those roots, without a connection to our ancestors, we don't know who we are. And if we don't know who we are, how do we know where we're going? So, awesome question, Sammy. I don't know if you were expecting an existential question like that, but yeah, that's my research. That's why I'm doing this. I want to reconnect and understand who I am so that I know where I am going. So thank you for the question. Oh, thank you, Sammy. Yeah, I've been feeling that too. Yes, so many of us have been feeling that. And so this is a way that we can start really kind of like putting the whole picture together. There's another quote. It's not actually a quote. It was a study done by the Canadian government there a few years back. So the Canadian government did a study on suicide rates because they noticed it was a huge problem. And one of the things that the study revealed was that the highest instances of suicide rates were amongst indigenous youth who had no connection to their culture, their creation stories. They had no tribal connection. And that is absolutely devastating. There are also higher instances of addiction rates and so many other things, right? But in the same study, they discovered that the lowest instances of suicide rates were amongst indigenous youth who had tribal connection, who knew where they came from, who understood their creation stories. And those instances were the lowest of any group, whether it was of European descent, age group, whatever it was, they were the lowest. So that shows us empirically that if we know ourselves, where we come from, we're going to be leading happier lives. So that is really, I think, this general feeling that we're all getting is reconnecting with our people, our roots, learning more about where we come from so that we know who we are and where we're going. And it's not just happening amongst the indigenous groups. It's happening, for example, among the Irish. Ireland has a history, a devastating history of forced assimilation, and originally called Gaelic, now called the Irish language, is being revitalized. This language did not have real speakers for a long time. They are revitalizing the language. Now it's being taught in schools. It was adopted as an official language. It's being taught in schools. So they're going through their same language reclamation process as many of our indigenous groups are. So I think this is a feeling that we're all getting as human beings, is we need to kind of reclaim our past and understand how our ancestors live more in community with nature, with our communities in general. And I think this is a great process to begin as well. So thank you so much for that question. Oh, yes, yes. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you for sharing. Who am I? I grew up as a gringo, but my great grandparents are Mexican and Puerto Rican. Exactly. Like, just trying to reclaim that, like, who am I actually, is a huge question. It doesn't mean that we're denying any other part of ourselves. For example, I knew for a fact that I am of African descent, European descent, and of Taino descent. And when I took that DNA test, there was like no area of the world that was not lit up. Like, so it's like, I'm a person of the world. I share DNA with British, Irish, Italian, obviously the Spanish and Portuguese, and Africans and Middle Easterners. I've got a little bit of everything, and so I'm not denying those parts. I just feel like this is a part of me that was intrinsic in me that I didn't understand was there, and I needed to discover it even more. So I think it is a beautiful journey that we can all go on to discover each and every bit of ourselves and kind of make ourselves whole again. So thank you so much for that question. Okay, and Jan, I'm Scottish too. My whole life I have felt it and did ceremonies with Lakota, but I'm finally found I am indigenous from Caribbean and South America. Yes, yes. So there are a lot of similarities amongst our indigenous groups, and there's a reason for that, scientifically proven reason too. So if you look at many of the studies done on genetics of indigenous Americans, you're going to find that most indigenous people come from about 6 founding mothers, like 6 women. Most of us come from 6 women. And like, for example, I did my haplogroup and I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like the mother of my mother of my mother of my mother. I have a direct line to one of the 6 founding mothers. So there's a reason why we are related. You can see it not just in genetics, but you can see it in language. Like I posted that video about how water is ni in Taino. Well, it is also ni in Lakota, and it is nibi in, I believe, Cree, and it is nipi in another indigenous language. So the Algonquin languages from the Northeast, we're sharing that. And I'm like, of course, it makes sense that our indigenous languages, you can see the similarities. And I believe Diné, which is the language spoken by the Navajo, the word is to, T-O, to. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's a slightly different word. And it's that same word is used in other languages as well, other indigenous languages. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we have that word. We hear it in our creation stories of Toa. There's a creation story about how the women had been taken away, and the children were crying Toa, Toa, for their mother's milk or mother's water. And then the babies are transformed into frogs that continued crying Toa, Toa, that are actually predictors of springtime. And what is springtime? The rainy season. So I was like, wait a second, that toa word does appear in Taino as well, but it's slightly different, toa, and it was used to designate like mother's milk. And I was like, but that totally makes sense because the frogs cry in the springtime, and the spring means water, and it's all kind of connected. So you're going to see these kind of like connections from all of these different indigenous languages in the Taino language. One of our community members mentioned when I talked to them about macana, the club that was made from a solid piece of wood that was used as arma, a weapon. Thank you. Thinking in like a couple different languages. So he goes, oh yeah, we called it macawito. And I was like, oh, of course. Like it was used in a lot of different languages. So we see that that similarity, and I love picking up on those patterns, those similarities. Very cool. Okay, great. Let me see. I'm just looking here at the chat just to see. Oh, thank you, lady. Takahi. I see Takahi. I don't understand all the other words, but buenas tardes, afternoon, namaskar. Oh, thank you so much. If anyone did 23andMe, they have a section of your maternal haplogroup. Yes, that's actually what I did. I did 23andMe, and I was able to look at my haplogroup. I heard the Lakota knew that Columbus came as word spread throughout the late 1400s and early 1500s. Yeah, actually, so a book that I don't have it here with me. I have it back on my shelf. One of the books that I recommend reading is 1491 by Charles C. Mann. And he touches on the different indigenous groups and the developments and so many things that most people don't know because they're not taught in school. And there's so many eye-opening things, like just brilliant things. I'm like, of course, that totally makes sense. About the development of agriculture, how the Americas were way beyond what so many Europeans had developed at that point, the writing systems that were developed, the development of like the Amazon rainforest, somehow thought uninhabitable, but they could literally terraformed on the Amazon. Like, it's just absolutely brilliant. Things that we can never even reproduce nowadays. So he talks about the fact, and I just want to make sure I see your question again. He talks about the fact that many of the empires that were quote unquote easily taken by the Spanish with like 60 men had actually fallen because indigenous people had been sending messengers like from one island to the mainland to different places saying, oh my gosh, you need to hear what's going on here. And of course, these messengers had brought with them diseases, smallpox, influenza. So by the time that the Spaniards, for example, made it to Peru, by the time they made it to the Yucatan, what had happened was that the messengers who had brought news of these covered people who were massacring others, they had already been infected. And so I was reading in 1491 about the fall of the Inca Empire. And they're like, yeah, but did you notice that the Inca recorded that such and such person that had died, and then this person died, and almost everyone in the royal lines had ended up dying of a disease. And you see it in some of the pictures that are used as historical documents by the Inca and others. They were literally drawing like people's faces full of poxes. So by the time the quote-unquote conquerors came and easily conquered an empire, what had happened was most of the people had already been infected and were dying because there was no cure for the disease because it had never been seen in the American continent. And another one, just like you say, the news not had spread up from the Florida area up as well. And so it is not surprising that news of these new people had actually reached almost all of the American continent. And unfortunately, a lot of the messengers had actually brought with them disease, which then like wiped most of the indigenous population even before the Europeans got there. So super interesting read. Read 1491. It is absolutely eye-opening. So thank you for that question and that comment. Very cool. So let me see. Coming up, just one last thing. I'm going to be talking about next year, 2022. I vow to myself it will be the year that I will be creating a Taino course. So I'm going to be taking videos and lessons that I put together, and I'm going to be seeing if I can work with a company that has a wonderful online app so that there's still a lot that I need to work out, but my idea is to have all the Taino available on an online app that you can either log in from your desktop, laptop, download on your mobile device. And because they do work with so many libraries in the US and around the world, if you're part of any of those library systems, you will get it for free. And that is my goal, to spread Taino to the world. And they're in libraries all over Canada, the UK, and I believe even Australia, plus the United States. So, and of course, if you're not part of one of the library systems, obviously you can still subscribe online and get their app. So that is my goal for 2022, is get Taino into the hands of everyone, like spread it. If we can spread this language, we are really going to be bringing it back, bringing back the sleeping language. So that is my goal for 2022. That is what I will be working on. Let's see. Interesting question. I wonder if children of Spanish and Taino developed a better resistance to smallpox as we still have Taino DNA. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And there was actually, so in 1491, he actually talks about, what could the indigenous Americans have done to stop, the spread, the horrific spread of these diseases. And because it is estimated that 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas died, was wiped. And there's a debate. I'm like, oh, that's too high. It cannot possibly be it. And he does so much research, from geneticists to even looking at an event that happened in recent history in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Russia, where there was an indigenous group that really didn't have a lot of contact, and there was some political issues. Russian soldiers were sent over to this area, and when they looked at the numbers of people who had died, it was about 90%. And they have a lot of the same DNA that our indigenous ancestors have. Why? Because that's where we came from. We were Asians who went up and came over. So they have a lot of similarities with our DNA. And so in that group, it was fairly recent history. They were like, yeah, 90% of people died. And so his estimates in that book in 1491 is about 90% of people died. And one of the questions was, how could we have prevented this? And one of the geneticists was like, well, we could have had children. And so the children of the surviving children of Tainos would have had natural immunities, because it wasn't just being exposed to a certain disease. He goes into the genetics of it. In our DNA, we have specialized cells that are developed over time and then passed on through DNA to counteract viruses, bacteria, and then some other types of infectious diseases that may come from, let's say, the types of infectious worms that can be in your body. So, and these things, over time, you develop a more general immunity to it, and your kids can end up fighting it off. There are also specialized cells that can, and I'm going to try to abbreviate this, that can basically attach to an attacking virus or bacteria. And those cells can then prevent you from getting sick because they attach, they create kind of a lock and key. And they notice when you look at indigenous people and Europeans, the Europeans have cells that can lock and attach, have different keys for more viruses and bacteria than do indigenous people. Because indigenous people tended to be able to, you know, for example, fight off any infections via like worms and things like that, like parasites. Versus Europeans, they couldn't as much, but they could fight viruses and bacteria. Why? Because of the way that viruses and bacteria spread in Europe versus the way that they were like basically maintained away in the Americas, and you were more likely to encounter parasites in the Americas. So, you know, the indigenous DNA was created to combat things that you would most likely encounter here, Europeans over here. So a way to fight that is to have children, and then your children could have the best of both worlds. You know, they could be able to fight more of the viruses and bacteria from the European side and more of the parasites from the Native American side. So that is a way scientifically that it could happen. So I think that is a good hypothesis, Jan, that maybe the reason why we survived wasn't just the fact that we hid or developed, you know, away from the Europeans, or created, you know, treaties so we could have our own lands. A lot of it also happened because we were in contact. So the initial contact itself may have led to a huge section of the population dying, but it also led to the creation of this more stronger DNA in us, the descendants of these people. So it is a mixed history there. There are many upsides and downsides to it. But thank you, Jan, for pointing that out. So, are there any other questions before we kind of log off for today? We're at the 2-hour mark, so I'm really sorry. I only meant this to be an hour, but you guys had such interesting questions. Let me just know. And if I can't get to them, you know, obviously I'll be able to answer them in the comments. In the meantime, I am going to log off for today. Thank you so much. I did see another new question come in. It has a very long response, but I will send you the resource where you can find the answers, okay? So you have been an extremely amazing audience. Thank you so much for practicing Taino with me. Thank you for asking so many good questions. I will continue gathering them, and I'll let you know when the next live session will be. I appreciate the fact that you're here with me, that you're learning Taino along with me, because I'm learning with you. And I appreciate all the questions that you send my way. In the meantime, Tai Karaya, Tai Gue, Usaweyu, whichever Taino language we speak. We will see you next time, next Friday, on our next YouTube video that I will be posting. Hahom, Bomatum, from my Boharak, my Yukayeke to yours. Have a lovely rest of your day.